The courtroom whispers. The old courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was alive with whispers. Sunlight filtered through tall, stained glass windows, casting pale colors on the wooden benches. It was the kind of place where you could feel the weight of every word, every judgment, every life that had passed through. Inside, people shifted nervously, glancing toward the front. A major hearing was about to begin, one involving an officer with a troubling reputation and a man who looked like any other quiet observer. Except he wasn't. Keanu Reeves sat near the back, dressed in a simple gray jacket and black jeans. He wore no sunglasses, no hat to cover his identity. But still, few recognized him. That morning, he wasn't a movie star. He wasn't the face behind countless films. He was just a man who had come to support someone he believed in. At the front of the room stood Officer Julie Haynes. Tall, sharp-eyed, and cold. She had served with the department for over 12 years. But rumors about her behavior had begun to surface. Whispers about profiling, about bias, about cases that never should have gone to court. Today she was here not as a witness, but as someone being questioned. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose in silence. A thin man in his 60s, Judge Merrill was known for being fair but firm. His presence immediately settled the room. Once seated, he scanned the files before him and then looked up. "We are here to continue the hearing of Officer Haynes versus Amari Lewis," he said. "Mr. Lewis has accused the officer of wrongful arrest and excessive force. Witnesses will now be presented." A quiet murmur filled the room. Amari Lewis, a young black man in his 20s, sat at the plaintiff's table. His hands were folded tightly in front of him, knuckles white with pressure. Beside him sat his lawyer, a small woman with glasses named Danielle. She gently touched his arm before standing. "Your Honor, we call our next witness, Keanu Reeves." Every neck in the courtroom turned. Someone gasped. A few people even stood up for a better look. Officer Haynes narrowed her eyes as Keanu walked forward slowly, quietly, like he was entering a place of sacred importance. He gave a respectful nod to the judge before taking the stand. The court clerk swore him in, and he sat down. "Mr. Reeves," Danielle began, her voice calm but confident, "can you explain to the court your relationship with Mr. Lewis?" Keanu leaned slightly forward, hands folded on his lap. "I met Amari outside a diner 2 months ago," he said. "He was helping an elderly man who had fallen. I stopped to help too. Later we talked. He told me what had happened to him with the police. I couldn't believe it, so I asked more questions. And then I saw the bruises. I saw the fear. I saw the truth in his eyes." Officer Haynes rolled her eyes, smirking. "So you've taken an interest in his case personally?" Danielle asked. "Yes," Keanu replied. "Not as a celebrity, just as a man who believes people should be treated with respect." The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Mr. Carson, stood quickly. "Your Honor, I must object. This is hearsay and irrelevant to the actual facts of the arrest." "I disagree," Judge Merrill said. "The character and actions of both the officer and the victim are under question. Continue." Danielle nodded and looked back at Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, did you speak with any witnesses who saw the arrest?" "Yes," he said. "I spoke to a woman named Lisa who works in the bakery across the street. She said Officer Haynes slammed Amari against the car without warning. Said he never resisted." "And did she agree to testify?" "She was afraid," Keanu said softly. "She's undocumented. She was afraid of retaliation." The room fell silent again. People leaned in, eyes wide. Even Officer Haynes shifted uncomfortably now. "But I recorded our conversation with her permission," Keanu continued. "I have the audio. She begged me not to share her name, but she wanted the truth heard." Danielle handed over a device to the court clerk. The audio was played. Lisa's voice trembled as she described what she had seen. The courtroom was quiet except for her words. When it ended, Keanu looked straight at Officer Haynes. "Power should protect the people," he said. "Not scare them, not hurt them, and never punish them for being born a certain way." Officer Haynes stood up suddenly, face flushed. Who even are you to say this? What do you know about law enforcement? The judge slammed the gavel once. Officer Haynes, you will not interrupt a witness. But she kept going, her voice was full of bitterness. This is just some actor trying to look good. You think you know anything about the streets? About the dangers we face every day? Keanu looked at her calmly, and then he said something that made the entire courtroom freeze. My father was killed by a corrupt officer when I was 3. My mother raised me alone, cleaning homes to survive. I know more than you think. A wave of shock moved through the room. Officer Haynes looked like the air had been knocked out of her. She stumbled back slightly and sat down, silent. Danielle stood slowly. No further questions. The judge nodded. Mr. Carson, you're cross, but Mr. Carson remained seated. He cleared his throat. No questions, Your Honor. Outside the courtroom, news had begun to spread. By the time the recess was called, reporters waited by the entrance. Inside, the energy had changed. Amari looked at Keanu with tears in his eyes. You didn't have to do that, he whispered. I did, Keanu replied, because this isn't just your fight. As they walked out into the hallway, people stared. Some nodded at Keanu. Others clapped softly. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just walked beside Amari like a silent shield. But Officer Haynes wasn't finished. She watched them leave, jaw clenched, heart pounding. Her pride had been shaken, and her secrets were beginning to come to light. In the days ahead, she would fight back harder than anyone expected, but she didn't know one thing. Keanu had faced storms before, and he never backed down from what was right. The storm behind the badge, the sun had already started to set when Keanu Reeves stepped out of the courthouse. The sky was painted in shades of gold and deep orange, but the mood outside was anything but peaceful. Reporters swarmed near the courthouse steps. Their cameras clicked rapidly, voices overlapping with questions and microphones shoved forward. Mr. Reeves, why are you involved in this case? Did you know Amari Lewis before the arrest? Do you believe Officer Haynes is racist? Keanu didn't stop. He kept his head down, gently guiding Amari through the chaos. A few officers nearby watched silently, their expressions unreadable. But one woman in uniform, standing near a patrol car, scowled deeply as she whispered something into her radio. Her name tag read Haynes. Inside the police department that night, Julie Haynes was fuming. The hearing had gone sideways. She never expected him. Not Keanu Reeves. She had counted on the usual process. Show up in uniform, present the report, use her authority and walk away untouched. But something about Keanu's presence shifted the air. Now people were doubting her. Now her history was being questioned. She slammed her locker shut and stormed into her captain's office. I want to file a complaint, she said through gritted teeth. He attacked my character in court. Captain Lewis, a middle-aged man, with thinning hair and tired eyes, looked up slowly. He didn't attack your character, Officer Haynes, he replied. He told a story, one that aligns with others we've heard but never had proof to act on. So that's it? She snapped. We just let this kid, this random actor, drag my name through the mud? Julie, the captain said quietly, I've received 3 other complaints about you in the last year. This isn't going away. Her fists clenched. She turned without another word and walked out. But inside, something dark twisted. She didn't see herself as the villain. She saw herself as someone under siege, unfairly targeted and now humiliated. And the worst part? No one was standing beside her. Meanwhile, Amari and Keanu sat in a small diner not far from the courthouse. The waitress brought them coffee and some toast, then quietly slipped away after recognizing Keanu. The place was quiet except for the soft hum of an old ceiling fan. I don't understand why you're helping me, Amari said finally, voice low. I'm just some guy trying to stay out of trouble. Keanu sipped his coffee slowly. You're not just some guy. You're a human being. That's enough. Amari looked down at the chipped edge of his plate, his throat tight. I used to believe people would help if they saw something wrong. But when it happened, no one said anything. They looked away. Keanu leaned back slightly. They were scared, or maybe they didn't know how. But that doesn't mean no one ever will. Amari nodded slowly, but the pain in his eyes didn't fade. The next morning, a video began circulating on social media. It showed part of Amari's arrest, filmed secretly from a nearby building. Though shaky, the footage clearly showed Officer Haynes yelling, grabbing Amari and forcing him down without warning. The person filming whispered, "He didn't do anything. He just asked a question." The video went viral within hours. Hashtags with Amari's name began trending. People were outraged. Protesters started gathering outside the courthouse demanding accountability. The police department issued a brief statement saying an internal investigation was underway. Keanu stayed quiet publicly, but behind the scenes, he worked with Danielle and a small legal team to prepare for the next hearing. He offered to pay for everything. When Danielle hesitated, he looked her in the eye. "I've seen too many people fall through the cracks," he said. "I have the resources. Use them." But as the support for Amari grew, so did the resistance. Officer Haynes wasn't backing down. She called a press conference and stood behind a podium in full uniform. "I have served this city for 12 years with dedication," she said. "This attack on my reputation is politically motivated and driven by outsiders who do not understand the risks we face every day. I will not apologize for doing my job." Her voice trembled slightly at the end. Some people clapped. Others watched. In silence. Back at the courthouse, Danielle reviewed a file with Keanu. "We need to bring in that bakery worker," she said. "Even if she's scared, her voice could change everything." Keanu nodded. "Then I'll talk to her again. I'll make sure she feels safe." Later that afternoon, Keanu visited the small bakery across from where the arrest happened. Lisa, the woman who had spoken on audio, was wiping down the counter when she saw him. Her eyes widened with fear. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They've been watching." Keanu glanced around. Sure enough, a dark car was parked across the street, engine running. "They won't hurt you," he said softly. "I promise." "How do you know that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "People disappear. Jobs disappear." He took a deep breath. "Because I'll make sure the whole world is watching. You won't be invisible anymore." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the courthouse. Nervous, quiet, but determined. Danielle met her at the door, holding her hand tightly. Meanwhile, Officer Haynes was in a closed-door meeting with her. Union rep. She was furious. "They're bringing in that bakery woman," she said. "The one who's undocumented. We can challenge her credibility." Her rep shook his head. "The video already hurt your case. If she tells the same story under oath, we've got a problem." Julie Haynes felt her world slipping, and when she stepped into the hallway, her eyes met Keanu's. For a moment, time seemed to stop. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. He was not going anywhere. Inside the courtroom, Lisa sat nervously in the witness box. The judge reminded everyone to maintain decorum. Danielle stepped forward. "Lisa, can you tell us what you saw that day?" She nodded. Her voice was thin but clear. "I saw the officer grab the man. He had only asked why he was being stopped. He didn't touch her, didn't yell. She pushed him hard, then threw him on the hood. Did he resist? No, he was scared. He kept saying he didn't do anything." "Thank you," Danielle said gently. The defense tried to challenge her, but every word Lisa spoke rang with honesty. The courtroom was silent again. Outside, the crowd grew. People held signs. They chanted for justice. Inside, Officer Haynes sat with clenched fists. Everything was falling apart. After the hearing, Amari turned to Keanu. "Why do you care so much?" he asked. Keanu looked out the window, watching people link arms outside. "Because no one stood up for my father," he said. "And I promised myself I'd never stay silent again." But the truth was, the battle was only beginning. In the shadows, Officer Haynes made a call, her voice low and tight. "I want everything on him," she said. "His background, his past, anything we can use." What she didn't know was that the more she dug, the closer she came to learning the truth about Keanu's life. And when she found it, It would shake her to the core. The truth behind the name night had fallen over Los Angeles, but the courthouse lights still burned. Inside the old building, quiet conversations echoed through empty hallways. Most people had gone, home but in a small conference room. Keanu sat with Danielle, Amari, and Lisa. The air felt heavy like a storm was coming. Not of wind and rain, but of confrontation, truth, and consequences. "She's going to come after all of us," Lisa said, her fingers wrapped tightly around a paper cup of tea. "Let her," Danielle replied. "We're not hiding anymore." Keanu didn't say much. He stared out the window, deep in thought. His phone buzzed and he picked it up. On the screen was a message from a private investigator he had hired quietly. "Officer Haynes has been tied to 4 other misconduct claims. None made it to court, all dismissed due to lack of evidence or fear." He showed the message to Danielle. "That's the pattern," she whispered. "Silent victims. Closed files. She thinks she's untouchable." "Not anymore," Keanu said. Elsewhere, Officer Julie Haynes sat alone in her apartment, a whiskey bottle beside her, her badge on the table. Her apartment was neat, almost cold. Pictures of her academy graduation, her early days on the force, and one photo of a man in uniform, her father. She stared at it now, bitterness twisting in her chest. "I did what I had to," she muttered. "I kept the streets safe." But part of her knew something was slipping. The old confidence, the unshakable belief that her actions would never be questioned, was breaking. And in that fear, she began digging. She pulled out her laptop and typed in Keanu Reeves' name. Not the Hollywood stories, not the headlines, the past, his family, his history. After an hour, she found something that made her hand freeze on the mouse. Officer Samuel Reeves, Lapd, killed in the line of duty, 1973. The report was old, blurry, but something about it chilled her. She read further. Shot during an altercation involving a fellow officer. Internal affairs investigation closed due to insufficient evidence. The name of that other officer? Officer Rick Haynes, her father. She leaned back in her chair, pale, breath caught in her throat. She remembered stories her father used to tell, stories of bravery, of danger, of cleaning up the streets. But never this. Never this. "No," she whispered. "This can't be the same guy." She searched again, family links, documents, and there it was. Samuel Reeves, survived by wife Elena and son, Keanu. Age 3. The room spun. Her chest tightened. The man sitting across from her in court, the man who had stared her down with quiet fire, was the son of the man her father had been accused of murdering, and she had tried to tear him down in court. She stood abruptly, her hands trembling. Memories came rushing in. Her father yelling late at night. Words she didn't understand back then. He shouldn't have asked questions. You protect your own. If someone threatens that, you stop them. Doesn't matter how. She stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back, but she barely recognized it. Meanwhile, back at Keanu's home, Amari sat on the couch watching the news. The protests were growing. People were speaking out. A few officers had even come forward anonymously, sharing stories of being told to ignore complaints. "You think we'll win?" Amari asked. Keanu sat beside him, quiet for a moment. "This isn't about winning," he said. "It's about standing up when it counts, even if your voice shakes." "I've never seen people care like this," Amari whispered. "They care because they saw you," Keanu said, "and they saw what happened. Now they can't unsee it." The next day in court, Officer Haynes arrived wearing her badge, her hair tied tightly back, her expression like stone. But inside, she was shaking. She had spent the whole night reading about the case from decades ago. Her father had died without ever facing punishment. And now his past had come back, in the form of the son of the man he'd silenced. As Keanu entered the room, their eyes met again. This time, Haynes looked away first. Danielle stepped forward. "Your Honor, we would like to submit new evidence," It includes witness statements from past misconduct claims related to Officer Haynes, along with video testimony and police reports. The judge reviewed the folder in silence. Officer Haynes's attorney shifted uncomfortably beside her. This evidence suggests a pattern of abuse of power, Danielle continued, and it supports Mr. Lewis's account. The judge nodded. This will be admitted. We will continue questioning tomorrow. After court, Keanu walked past Haynes. She stopped him with a single word. Wait. He turned. Calm as always, she looked at him for a long time before speaking. You knew. He nodded. I found out after I saw your badge the first day, he said. I remembered the name. Did some research. Why didn't you say anything? Because this isn't about revenge, Keanu said. It's about justice for Amari, for the others, for everyone your badge was supposed to protect. She swallowed hard. My father wasn't a bad man. Maybe not at first, Keanu replied. But something changed, and he hurt people. I don't hate you, but I won't let you hurt anyone else. For the first time, her voice cracked. Do you think I can come back from this? Keanu looked her straight in the eyes. Only if you're honest. And only if you start with the truth. That night, she went home and stared again at her father's photo. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then placed it face down on the shelf. Meanwhile, Danielle got a call. The district attorney's office wanted to meet. The case was now under public pressure and a potential criminal charge was being considered. Not just for Officer Haynes, but for higher-ups who had buried complaints for years. When Danielle told Keanu, he didn't smile. He just nodded. Then, we keep going, he said, until no one feels like they have to be silent again. But the journey was far from over, and as word spread of Keanu's quiet crusade, others began to step forward. Victims, witnesses, even officers who had been forced into silence. One by one, the truth was rising. Voices in the silence. The morning air outside the courthouse was colder than usual, with a gray sky hanging low over the city. It was the kind of day where everything felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath. People had gathered early. Protesters, reporters, quiet observers. Some held signs, some just stood in silence. But all of them were waiting for what came next. Inside, Keanu Reeves walked calmly through the courthouse doors. Behind him was Amari, dressed in a simple jacket, his eyes, tired but focused. Danielle followed close, holding a thick folder filled with testimonies, statements, and evidence. Their small team looked like any other group in a courthouse, but everyone knew this was different now. The courtroom was already buzzing. Officer Julie Haynes sat stiffly at the defense table, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Her face looked pale, drawn. For the first time, the confidence she once wore like armor was gone. Judge Merrill entered, and the room rose. After everyone was seated, he looked at both sides. Today, he said, we begin with a new witness. This individual has chosen to break a long silence. The court is to show them full respect and attention. Danielle stood. Your Honor, we call Sergeant Mark Ellison. A quiet gasp went through the courtroom. A man in his 50s stepped forward. Tall, graying, with a face marked by years of work on the streets. He wore a civilian suit, not his, uniform, and his hands trembled slightly as he took the stand. Sergeant Ellison, Danielle began, how long did you serve in the LAPD? 32 years, he said. And during those years, did you ever work with Officer Haynes? Yes. She was on my team for 2 years. Did you ever witness behavior from her that concerned you? He nodded slowly. Yes. Several times, she made arrests that didn't follow procedure. She used force when it wasn't necessary. And when I brought it up to my supervisor, I was told to let it go. Why didn't you speak up then? His voice cracked. Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing my pension. Afraid of being blacklisted. But watching that video, seeing that young man on the ground, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Julie Haynes didn't look up. Thank you, Danielle said gently. No further questions. The defense tried to rattle Ellison, questioning. his timing, his motives. But the damage was done. The truth had been spoken, and it had come from inside the system. Outside the courtroom, the crowd grew larger. People were chanting now, calling for reform, accountability, justice. The noise drifted through the courthouse walls like a wave. Inside, Danielle approached the bench again. Your Honor, we have 3 more officers ready to testify. Each has written statements confirming a pattern of misconduct by Officer Haynes. The judge raised an eyebrow. Submit them to the court. We will take time to review before continuing. As court recessed for the afternoon, Keanu walked outside and stood quietly among the crowd. People recognized him, of course. Some tried to take pictures, but he waved them off gently. This isn't about me, he said. It's about something much bigger. Amari stood beside him. People began to approach, shaking his hand, thanking him for standing up. A woman in her 70s hugged him and whispered, "My grandson went through the same thing. No one listened. Thank you." Tears filled Amari's eyes, but he held them back. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Officer Haynes sat in an empty hallway. The walls around her felt tighter than ever. The silence was louder than shouting. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages. Most were angry, some supportive. One from her younger brother simply read, "Julie, what happened to you?" She didn't reply. Later that night, in a press conference, Danielle addressed the public. This case is not just about one man. It's about many. It's about how power can be misused, how silence becomes protection for the wrong people. We're not here to destroy anyone. We're here to tell the truth. Keanu stood behind her, quiet, steady. But back at home, he sat alone on his couch, staring at a framed photo of his father. It was old, edges worn, taken before the tragedy that changed everything. He whispered softly, "We're finally telling your story." The next morning brought another surprise. A letter arrived at the courthouse signed anonymously by someone who claimed to have worked in internal affairs. It detailed how 4 cases involving Officer Haynes had been closed quietly, under pressure from high-ranking officials. It named names. It included dates. The judge reviewed it privately and immediately called a meeting with legal teams from both sides. "This is serious," he said. "We may be looking at a much broader issue." Officer Haynes's attorney looked shaken. "We request a pause in proceedings while we respond to these allegations." "Denied," the judge said firmly. "This court will continue. The people deserve to hear the full truth." In the hallway afterward, Haynes walked up to Keanu. Her voice was hoarse. "You could have just exposed me quietly, gone to the press, ended me in the shadows." "That's not justice," he said. "I'm not trying to end you. I'm trying to fix what's broken." "You know my father didn't mean to kill yours," she whispered. "Maybe," Keanu replied, "but he never told the truth, and neither did you. Until now." That night, Officer Haynes wrote a letter. She addressed it to the judge, the LAPD, and the public. In it, she confessed to using force unnecessarily. She admitted to bending rules, driven by fear and pride. She said she believed she was keeping people safe, but in the process, she had hurt innocent people. The next day, she read it aloud in court. People cried. Others watched in stunned silence. Then she turned to Amari. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought I was protecting the city, but I wasn't protecting you. I see that now." Amari didn't speak, but he nodded once, just enough to show that he heard. As court adjourned for the day, Keanu and Danielle sat on a bench outside. "This feels like something," she said quietly. "Like change." "It's the beginning," Keanu said. "Just the beginning." But they all knew the hardest part was yet to come, because the truth had been revealed. But justice still had to be delivered. The weight of justice, the sky above Los Angeles was heavy with clouds, the kind that made the whole city feel slower, quieter. Inside the courthouse, though, nothing was quiet. By the time the doors opened, dozens had gathered. Some wore shirts that said "Justice for Amari." Others simply stood with solemn expressions, holding candles, holding hope, The fifth day of the trial was expected to be the longest. Judge Merrill had cleared the docket. No other cases would be heard that day. This courtroom, this one case, had become more than just a legal proceeding. It had become a mirror for the entire city. Keanu Reeves arrived just after 8. He wore the same jacket as the day before. He didn't care about cameras or headlines. He walked with purpose, and beside him walked Amari Lewis, head held high. Inside the courtroom, Officer Julie Haynes sat alone at the defense table. Her lawyer had advised her to step away from the case, but she had refused. She wanted to see it through. Her letter had gone public overnight. It had been printed in full by every major news outlet. Thousands had read her confession. Many condemned her. Some forgave her. Judge Merrill began the day with firm words. This court has heard testimonies, seen evidence. And now, we will hear closing arguments. Let us be reminded that the goal here is not vengeance, it is truth, and the law must serve the truth. Danielle rose. Her voice was calm, but her words struck like thunder. Ladies and gentlemen, she said to the jury, what happened to Amari Lewis is not just a mistake. It is the result of unchecked power, silence, and fear. We have heard from other officers, from witnesses, from victims, and now you must ask, what happens if we allow this to continue? She paused, turning toward Amari. He could have stayed quiet. He could have let this go. But he stood up, and because of him, others found their voices too. Then she turned to Keanu. He didn't have to be here. He didn't have to give his time, his name, his story. But he did. Not to be a hero, not to make headlines, but to remind us what humanity looks like. The courtroom was silent. The defense stood next. The new attorney, a young man with kind eyes, didn't try to discredit the evidence. Instead, he spoke softly. My client, Officer Haynes, has admitted to her mistakes. She has accepted responsibility. And while that cannot erase what was done, it must be acknowledged. He looked toward the jury. If we want change, we must also believe in the possibility of transformation. This case is about truth, yes, but it is also about what comes after the truth. After closing arguments, the jury left the room. The judge ordered a short recess. People stepped outside, some to breathe, some to cry. Keanu sat on the front steps watching the sky. Amari sat beside him, elbows on his knees, head down. What if they don't believe us? He asked. Then we keep fighting, Keanu said. We don't stop here. A few moments later, Lisa from the bakery joined them. She handed Amari a small paper bag. Chocolate chip, she said. Fresh this morning. He smiled faintly. Thank you. More people gathered around. Strangers who had watched from the crowd. Young activists, retired officers, parents, children, all drawn to something deeper than a court case, something that felt like healing. Inside the jury room, the discussion was intense. Some jurors were angry, others were heartbroken. One man wept as he read the transcript of Lisa's testimony again. A woman whispered, "That could have been my son." After 4 hours, the jury returned. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Families clutched one another's hands. Judge Merrill entered and took his seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? He asked. The foreman, an older black woman in her 60s, stood. We have, Your Honor. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He read it, then nodded. Will the defendant please rise? Officer Haynes stood. Her hands trembled. In the case of Amari Lewis versus Officer Julie Haynes, on the charge of wrongful arrest and excessive force, we find the defendant liable. A murmur spread through the room. On the matter of civil damages, we award the plaintiff $350,000. Amari's knees almost gave out. Danielle grabbed his arm. Keanu stood behind him, silent but proud. The judge banged his gavel once. This court is adjourned. Outside, the news exploded. Headlines ran with the verdict. Officer found guilty in high-profile civil case. Keanu Reeves' quiet fight for justice. Truth wins in landmark courtroom drama. But inside the courthouse, no one was celebrating. not in the loud, joyful way. The victory was real, but it was also heavy. Officer Haynes stood at the edge of the hallway. She approached Amari slowly. "Don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I needed you to know I'm sorry. Not because I lost, but because I was wrong." Amari looked at her for a long time. "I don't hate you," he said quietly. "I just want people to be safe." She nodded once and walked away. Danielle turned to Keanu. "You kept your promise," she said. He shook his head. "He kept his voice," he said, looking at Amari. "I just stood beside him." Later that evening, a candlelight vigil was held outside the courthouse, not just for Amari, but for every name not spoken in court, every life affected, every truth silenced. Keanu stood in the back, watching. A young girl approached him with her father. She looked up and said, "Thank you for helping him." He knelt beside her and smiled gently. "Thank you for believing it matters." As the candles flickered in the breeze, something felt different in the city. Not perfect, not fixed, but changed. A small boy placed a sign near the courthouse steps. It read, "You can't fight hate with silence." Keanu read it, then whispered, softly to himself, "No, you fight it with truth." What justice leaves behind the morning after the verdict, the city of Los Angeles felt different. Not quieter exactly, but calmer. Like it had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The sun broke through the clouds, casting soft gold across the courthouse steps where candles still flickered from the night before. Most had burned low, but a few remained lit, their small flames stubborn against the wind. Keanu Reeves stood, alone in front of the building. He didn't speak. He didn't pose for cameras. He just stood with both hands in his pockets, looking at the words someone had scrawled on a piece of cardboard and taped to the railing. Truth doesn't whisper. It waits. And then it speaks. He stared at it for a while, then turned and walked down the steps where Amari was waiting with Danielle. "We have an interview request from the morning news," Danielle said. Amari looked nervous. "I don't want to be a symbol. I'm not perfect." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be. Just be honest. That's enough." They agreed to meet a journalist from a local independent station, someone who'd covered the case without bias, without hype. The interview was quiet, heartfelt. Amari didn't talk about anger or revenge. He talked about fear, about being human, about learning to believe in his own voice. "I thought I was alone," he said on camera. "But I wasn't. People showed up. They listened, and that gave me the strength to speak." The video went viral, not because of drama, not because of celebrity, but because of truth. Meanwhile, at the police department, changes were happening fast. The Internal Affairs Division launched a full review of past misconduct complaints. Several officers were suspended. Supervisors were questioned. The chief of police issued a public statement, promising policy changes and better training. Officer Julie Haynes resigned. In a letter to the department, she wrote, "I lost my way. I believed fear was strength. I let silence become protection. I ask forgiveness not just from those I hurt, but from the badge itself, for staining what it's supposed to mean." The department didn't make a spectacle of her resignation, but some officers who once defended her now spoke openly about the need for reform. One lieutenant even said, "We can't lead the community if we don't first lead ourselves." Days turned into weeks. Amari got a job offer from a youth center. They wanted him to mentor teenagers, especially those struggling with trust in the justice system. At first, he wasn't sure he could do it, but Keanu encouraged him. "You don't have to have all the answers," he said. "Just show up, like you did in court." Amari accepted. Danielle, now something of a local hero, received messages from all over the country. Some were from young law students. Others were from families who had lost someone, people who had never seen justice. She started working with a nonprofit group that offered legal support for victims of police misconduct. Her first act was to reopen an old case, one that had been buried 5 years earlier. She didn't know if she would win, but that wasn't the point. Meanwhile, Keanu kept his distance from the media. He refused interviews. When reporters tried to chase him down, he waved them off with kindness but finality. He didn't want credit. He didn't want to be the face of anything. He just wanted people to keep standing. One afternoon, he visited the cemetery where his father was buried. The grave was simple. Overgrown, with grass, he knelt down and cleared the dirt from the name, Samuel Reeves. "We finally told your story," he whispered. "It took a long time, but we did it." He stayed there for a while. The wind moved gently through the trees. A few birds called. Overhead, it was peaceful, honest, quiet. When he left, he passed by a small group of young people sitting on a bench, reading about the case on their phones. One of them noticed him and stood up. "Hey." "Thank you," she said softly. He smiled. "Thank Amari." "We do," she replied. "But we thank you too, for not walking away." In the months that followed, the case continued to ripple. More people came forward, across states, across cities. Some started movements. Others began community watch groups, not to fight the police, but to work with them. A new kind of conversation had started. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And behind it all was a courtroom. A young man who chose to speak. A lawyer who refused to let fear win. And an actor who showed up, not to be seen but to see. Keanu never returned to that courthouse again. But sometimes when he walked through Los Angeles, people would stop him. Not to ask for pictures, not to ask about movies, just to say thank you, and he would always nod, place a hand over his heart, and say the same thing. Keep standing. Because justice doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it comes like a whisper that refuses to fade. Sometimes it comes like a man who remembers, a courtroom that listens, a truth that won't stay buried, and a city that chooses to begin again.